I had just blown out 34 candles when my husband took the microphone, stepped into the space beside my cake, and announced that he had something important to say. Grant was still wearing his wedding ring when he turned away from me and looked toward the table closest to the stage, where Delaney Frost rose in a cream-colored dress and pressed one hand to her chest. Then my husband walked toward her, lowered himself onto one knee, and pulled a black velvet box from his jacket, while nearly 100 people who had known us as a married couple watched in stunned silence. 3 weeks earlier, Grant had personally asked Marin to move Delaney closer to the stage and tell the band exactly when to stop playing after I blew out my candles. 2 nights before the party, he had texted Delaney that I would be too shocked to make a scene in front of everyone, and he believed that because he thought I had never seen the message. He also believed the diamond he bought was still inside the box. He was wrong about that too. Grant lifted the lid, and the smile disappeared from Delaney's face before he even understood what he was looking at. There was no ring inside, only a folded copy of a subpoena with Delaney Frost printed across the top and one sentence beneath it. "Before you say yes, you should know what he told me about you." She read it twice, looked at me, then turned on Grant. "You said she knew. You said the divorce was already handled." For the first time that night, Grant looked directly at me, still kneeling beside the woman he had planned to propose to at my birthday. I did not take the microphone or explain myself to the room. I only met his eyes and said, "You promised everyone would know the truth tonight. I decided to let you keep that promise." As he stood, a process server stepped forward to officially serve him with the divorce papers and Delaney with the subpoena, requiring her to preserve the messages, receipts, hotel records, and other evidence tied to the money Grant had spent during our marriage. 3 months before my birthday, the first thing I found was not a love letter or a photograph, but an ordinary hotel confirmation sitting in the family email account. Grant had used that address years earlier for a loyalty program, and the stay matched the exact weekend he claimed he was traveling with Coulter to meet a client. I did not call the hotel, search his private accounts, or confront him when he came home. I only looked at what was already in front of me. And once I started paying attention, the pieces stopped looking accidental. There was a dinner for 2, then a jewelry purchase, then another hotel stay booked with an employee rate connected to the boutique property where Delaney Frost worked. A public photo on her social media showed Grant's watch near the edge of the table, the same one I had given him for our anniversary. None of those things alone told me everything, but together they gave me a woman, a pattern, and a husband who had gotten careless because he believed I would never look closely enough. Then an old tablet Grant had once used at home synced a message from Delaney asking, "Why is she still planning that birthday party if your marriage is over?" His answer appeared underneath it. "Because she thinks it can still be saved. After the party, she won't have a choice." I read those words twice, and for the first time, I understood that Grant was not simply preparing to leave me. He had already chosen the night he wanted me to find out, and he wanted a room full of people there when it happened. Delaney sent another question before I could look away. "Does she know I'm coming?" Grant did not answer yes. He wrote, "Let me handle her." That night, he came home, ate the dinner I had kept warm, and told me his meeting with Coulter had run late. But the next morning, Marin called and asked, "Do you know a woman named Delaney Frost?" Grant just moved her to the table beside the stage. Then Marin told me one more thing. Grant had asked exactly when the microphone would be available after I blew out my candles. Grant started preparing me for the end without ever admitting there was an end. One night over dinner, he pushed his plate aside and said, maybe we had changed. Maybe after my birthday we should give each other some space and stop forcing what no longer felt easy. I asked him directly if there was someone else. He looked straight at me and answered, "No. I would never do that to you." A few days later, the old tablet showed me what he had been telling Delaney. According to Grant, he had already spoken to me. I understood our marriage was over. And the only reason I was still there was because I did not want to lose the house. None of that conversation had ever happened. He was using my silence as proof for a story I had never agreed to. Delaney had questions of her own, and that was the part I kept coming back to. She wanted to know why Grant still slept at home, why there were no divorce papers, and why I was planning a birthday party as if we were still married. Grant gave her a different answer every time, but instead of walking away, she finally wrote, "Just tell me she won't make a scene when you do it." That sentence told me she did not know everything, but she knew enough to understand I had not simply disappeared. I found the proof of the ring while checking Grant's coat before taking it to the dry cleaner. A receipt slipped from the inside pocket, and the amount had come from the same joint account Grant had recently told me we needed to protect because money was getting tight. I photographed it, put it back exactly where I found it, and called Blair Kendrick. She did not promise me the house, every dollar, or some perfect ending, only told me to preserve what I could legally access and stop Grant from rewriting facts he had already created. When I told Blair about the microphone request, she went quiet for a moment. "Are you telling me he plans to propose to her there?" I looked at the receipt again and answered, "I think he plans to make me watch." 3 weeks before my birthday, Grant started acting like the husband I remembered, bringing me coffee in bed and asking about my day. One morning, he kissed my forehead and said, 34 should be a birthday you never forget," then carried my cup downstairs as if nothing between us had changed. Less than 10 minutes later, the old tablet lit up with a message he had sent Delaney, "Just a little longer. Smile through the party and let me handle the rest." I read it twice, because those words explained every kindness he had suddenly remembered how to give me. That afternoon, Marin sent me the revised seating chart Grant had changed without telling me. Delaney was now at the table closest to the stage. Coulter sat nearby, and I had been moved farther from the microphone after the cake. Grant had also asked the staff to leave an open space in front for a special moment. Blair was reviewing dinners and hotel stays with Delaney that appeared to have been submitted to Grant's employer as client entertainment. Coulter finally started asking questions when Grant told him about the proposal, because Grant had always claimed our marriage was already finished and I knew exactly what was happening. "You told me she knew," Coulter pushed, but Grant barely hesitated before answering. "She knows enough." That was when Coulter understood he had not been protecting a private separation. He had been helping Grant maintain a story that had never been true. Before I left Blair's office, she showed me the draft subpoena for Delaney and reminded me that the copy inside the ring box would only be the reveal. A process server would handle official service. I asked whether all of this was too much, and Blair simply turned her phone toward me. Grant's latest message to Delaney was still on the screen. "Once I do it in front of everyone. Cassidy can't pretend we're still married." I read it twice, then handed the phone back, because Grant had chosen the room, the microphone, the timing, and the woman he wanted beside him when my birthday became his announcement. The supper club held nearly 100 people that night, friends who had eaten at our table, co-workers who knew us as a married couple, and people who had watched Grant kiss me hello for years. Delaney arrived in a cream-colored dress that looked too formal for someone else's birthday, and Grant crossed the room to greet her before he ever came back to me. He pulled out her chair, stayed close to her table, and kept checking the inside pocket of his jacket while pretending everything was normal. I knew exactly what his hand was touching. Before the cake came out, Coulter pulled Grant aside near the bar and lowered his voice. "Don't do this here," he warned. But Grant only looked amused and answered, "Now you have a conscience?" Coulter held his ground. "You told me your marriage was over. This isn't over." Grant barely blinked before replying, "It will be in 10 minutes." And Coulter walked out before the candles were lit. After I blew them out, Grant took the microphone and started talking about second chances, courage, and meeting someone who made him want to begin again. Then he called Delaney forward, dropped to one knee, and opened the black velvet box while the entire room went quiet. There was no diamond inside, only a folded subpoena with Delaney Frost printed across the top and one sentence beneath it. Before you say yes, you should know what he told me about you. Delaney read it once, then again, and the expression on her face changed before Grant understood what had happened. She turned toward him first. You said she knew. Grant stood too quickly, looked straight at me, and snapped. Cassidy set this up. I stayed where I was and answered. I didn't choose the ring. I didn't invite her. I didn't ask for the microphone. You did. Delaney looked at me next and asked, What did he tell you about me? And I replied, that you were a client he barely knew. That landed harder than anything else because she finally understood he had not only lied to me about her, he had erased her whenever it suited him. A process server stepped forward and officially served Grant with the divorce papers, then served Delaney with the subpoena requiring her to preserve messages, emails, hotel records, and financial evidence. Grant turned to her immediately and said, Don't give them anything until I get a lawyer. Delaney stared at him for a long second before asking, Why? What else am I going to find? The room did not erupt into applause or shouting after Delaney asked what else she was going to find. Some guests left quietly, others avoided Grant's eyes, and a few people crossed the room to stand near me without saying anything. The friends who had known about Delaney but convinced themselves I must know too suddenly looked very interested in their drinks. Grant tried to follow Delaney toward the door, but she stopped him before he reached her. Did she make you tell me you were already separated? Grant answered that Delaney did not understand the whole situation, and she looked at him as if that excuse had finally expired. Then explain why she called me a client, she said, holding the subpoena in one hand. Grant opened his mouth, but no answer came quickly enough to save him. Marin stepped in when he moved toward the sound equipment and told him the microphone belonged to the venue now. He gave it back because there was nowhere left in that room where he still controlled the story. Then, a regional manager from Grant's company, who had attended through a work connection, walked over with a face that had gone completely still. He had recognized Delaney's name, her hotel, and several of the places Grant had previously submitted as business expenses. Don't come in Monday, he told Grant. We're reviewing your expenses. Grant did not argue, because he understood exactly which dinners, hotel stays, and supposed client meetings had just acquired a face. Delaney left alone, still carrying the subpoena, and she did not look back at Grant when he called her name. I left before he did, with Marin walking beside me until the front door, and Grant followed far enough to say, You just ruined my life in front of everyone. I turned once and answered, You were on one knee before I said a word. By morning, a short video of Grant opening the box had already started moving through our circle and the local hospitality community. But the message that mattered most came from Delaney to Blair before noon. I won't delete anything. Delaney complied with the subpoena after speaking with her attorney, and what she turned over did not make her innocent. But it exposed how Grant had divided his life into two stories. With me, he said we needed space. With her, he claimed our marriage was over and I refused to leave the house. Her messages showed she questioned why he still lived with me, why no divorce had been filed, and why I did not know she would attend my birthday. She saw the gaps, but she stayed, came to the party, and waited for him to propose. Grant could no longer pretend one woman imagined everything while the other knew nothing. Then Blair found the message I had never seen, showing what Grant expected after my birthday. He had promised Delaney that I would leave the house for a few weeks once the proposal happened, giving them space to start their life there. During that same period, he told me he only needed a few days apart and never said he wanted our marriage to end. Both stories depended on the other woman accepting something I had never agreed to. Once those messages stood together, Grant had nowhere left to hide. Coulter had to provide information about trips Grant claimed were client meetings they attended together. Under oath, he admitted there had been no clients on several trips and that he let Grant use his name as cover because he thought it was private. He kept his job, but most shared friends stopped inviting him after learning how long he had helped the lie continue. Grant's employer reviewed his expenses and found personal dinners and hotel stays submitted as business costs. He was terminated for false records and dishonesty during the investigation, not because of the affair. Delaney's hotel reviewed her employee rates and found policy violations tied to several of Grant's stays, costing her the job she had built around. During the divorce, the marital money Grant spent on that relationship was considered when dividing our assets, without giving me everything. By then, Grant and Delaney were blaming each other, and every explanation from one weakened the other's story. Grant finally asked for a private settlement and said, "You already embarrassed me. What more do you want?" I looked at him and answered, "Nothing more. Just what you already spent." A year later, Grant was living in a smaller apartment, working a different sales job, and no longer speaking to Delaney. Once, he texted that my birthday party had destroyed his life, and I answered, "I didn't ask you to kneel." Delaney left hospitality and moved into another line of work. Her final contact was an email confirming that every requested document had been turned over. I did not reply, because there was nothing left between us. Coulter stayed in the city, but invitations stopped after people learned how long he had helped Grant hide the truth. Marin remained one of the few people I kept close because she had spoken when the evidence appeared. Blair closed my file after the divorce settlement gave me use of the house and adjusted assets for the marital money Grant had spent on Delaney. I moved into a role at a lakeside hotel, away from rooms tied to his lies. For the first time, my work and home belonged to days I did not have to explain. On my next birthday, I kept the celebration small, with Marin and a few people who had stayed. There was no stage, no microphone, no special announcement, and no velvet box waiting in anyone's pocket. The diamond was handled as part of the property process, as Blair advised, and I never kept it as a trophy. I did keep the first copy of Delaney's subpoena in an envelope inside my desk drawer, not to remember what Grant lost, but to remember the night he tried to decide my story in front of everyone and opened a box that finally made his own words answer for him. Some endings are quieter than people expect. A peaceful home, a smaller table, a few honest friends, and no more wondering whether the person beside you is telling the truth. Wherever you are watching from, remember this: starting over is not losing everything. Sometimes it is getting yourself back again.